A Victorian mansion rises from the desert floor in downtown Phoenix, its octagonal turret piercing the sky like a silent witness to everything time tried to bury. Sunlight falls across its brick walls and carved woodwork, but the shadows it casts tell a different story. One of ambition, financial ruin, political turmoil, illness, and a family whose dreams unraveled behind its windows. From the moment it appeared on Monroe Street in 1895, the Rosson House carried an air of beauty and tragedy that refuses to fade, even more than a century later. Subscribe to Empire Manners for more documentaries like this. In the late 1800s, Phoenix was transforming from a dusty frontier settlement into a rising city powered by new technologies. Electrical plants were flickering to life, a domestic water system was reshaping survival, and rival telephone companies raced to connect the desert town with the modern world. Monroe Street was becoming the boulevard of prestige, where wealth, politics, and public power converged. It was here, at the corner of Monroe and 6th Streets, that Dr. Roland Lee Rosson decided his family would stake their future. A future he imagined bright, prosperous, and permanent. Rosson's story began long before the mansion. He arrived in Phoenix in 1879, a young physician searching for opportunity in a city carved from heat and dust. Over the next 2 decades, he built not just a medical practice, but a public life that placed him at the center of the city's growth. He became a coroner, a public administrator, a 2-term county treasurer, and eventually, in 1895, the mayor of Phoenix. His name filled the columns of the Arizona Republic, sometimes in praise, sometimes in conflict, but always with the aura of a man who belonged to the shaping of a new American city. At home, Rosson and his wife, Flora Murray, were raising a growing family. Their marriage in 1880 brought 7 children into the world, but only 5 would survive. 2 infants, a son and a daughter, died early, leaving quiet sorrows that shaped the rhythm of their home. The Rossons lived on Block 14 long before the mansion existed. Flora had purchased the land in 1882 for $1,000 from her half-sister, and historical maps suggest they lived in a modest adobe house on the same property. Their early life unfolded on this ground, their children's first steps, their tragedies, their hopes, their ambitions. By the mid-1890s, Phoenix was booming, and Rosson wanted a home that reflected not just comfort, but significance. In September 1894, newspapers announced that a grand residence would be constructed on the Rosson property, designed by A.P. Petit, a respected San Francisco architect. The design would be his final work before his sudden death. Phoenix builders submitted their bids, and George E. Cisney won the project with an offer of $7,525. Brick by brick, under the desert sun, the house began to rise. By December, the structure was nearly complete, and by March 1895, the first advertisement appeared. Dr. Rosson's office and residence, corner of Monroe and 6th. The mansion was officially part of the city. The Rosson House was unlike anything Phoenix had seen. A stick Eastlake Queen Anne Victorian masterpiece, it blended influences from around the world. Its Chinese moongate, Italianate hooded windows, and French turret gave it an elegance unusual for the frontier. Inside, the house featured electric lighting, rare running water with both hot and cold taps, an upstairs indoor bathroom, and a telephone at a time when most households had none. The streetcar line passed directly outside. For a family in 1895 Phoenix, it was the definition of modern luxury. For a moment, it seemed like the Rossons had achieved the life they had worked toward for nearly 2 decades. The house stood among the finest in the city, alongside homes belonging to the Churchill, Jacobs, Murray, and Hine families. Visitors entering the mansion would have seen polished wood, elaborate craftsmanship, and the confident glow of a home built for a rising political figure. But barely a year after its completion, the Rosson House would no longer belong to the Rossons. During the winter of 1895, the family rented their brand-new mansion to an unexpected tenant, Whitelaw Reid, the powerful editor of the New York Tribune, and one of the most influential Republican voices in America. Reid had come to Arizona seeking relief from a lung condition. His doctors believed the dry desert air could restore his health, and the Rosson House, with its wide porches and tall windows, became his temporary sanctuary. It was an unusual arrangement. Reed was a national political figure. Rosson was a local Democrat. Yet at this moment, politics mattered far less than survival. Reed lived in the mansion through the winter of 1895 to 1896, following an open-air regimen, working from Phoenix through typed letters and telegraph cables that connected the desert directly to New York. From inside the Rosson House, he continued publishing editorials and managing his newspaper empire. In 1896, he rented a second home nearby, further suggesting that the Rossons needed the income and were unlikely to return soon. Behind the scenes, their finances were weakening. Newspaper records from 1896 and 1897 list delinquent taxes owed by both Roland and Flora. The family's newly built symbol of success had become a financial burden, and renting the home was a lifeline. By June 1897, after months of strain, the Rossons sold the house and half of Block 14 to Aaron and Carrie Goldberg for $10,000. A month later, the Rosson family left Phoenix, moving to Los Angeles in search of better educational opportunities for their children and perhaps a chance to escape the mounting pressures they faced. For Phoenix, the sale marked the end of the Rossons' chapter. For the family, it marked the beginning of their final tragedy. In Los Angeles, Dr. Rosson fell ill. After several weeks of suffering, he died on May 12, 1898. Speculation swirled about the cause, fueled by recent life insurance purchases, but an autopsy concluded he died of gastroenteritis. Flora lived in Los Angeles until her own death in 1911, her life described simply on her certificate: household duties. Their story had ended far from the home they had once believed would secure their legacy. The Rosson House remained behind, carrying their memories in its walls. After the Rosson family left Phoenix, the mansion they built with such hope entered a new chapter, one shaped not by its creators, but by the forces of history, fortune, and the harsh changes of a growing city. The house stood silent on Monroe Street, its turret casting long shadows over the dusty roads, waiting for the next family to imprint their story onto its walls. That family would be the Goldbergs, one of the most influential Jewish families in early Arizona. In June of 1897, Aaron and Carrie Goldberg purchased the Rosson House for $10,000, a price that reflected both the house's grandeur and the urgency of the Rossons' departure. Aaron, a prominent businessman and civic leader, co-owned Goldberg's clothing store and played an instrumental role in the political shaping of Phoenix. He served in the 19th and 20th territorial legislatures and even authored the bill that permanently established the state capitol in Phoenix. His reach extended across the city. The Phoenix City Council, the Board of Trade, and the Capitol Commission all included his name. Under the Goldbergs, the house became a symbol of stability and social presence. Their children, Hazel, Selma, and Chester, grew up within those Victorian rooms, with Chester noted as having been born in the house itself. In the late 19th century, as Phoenix expanded and modernized, the Goldberg family's influence carried through the city's business and political circles. Their time in the mansion was a period of dignity and prominence. But as Phoenix continued to evolve, so did the fate of the Rosson House. On September 7, 1904, after 7 years of ownership, the Goldbergs sold the property to S.W. Healy, a man whose life reflected the spirit of the early West, ambitious, restless, and constantly in motion. Stephen W. Higley had worked as a railroad builder before becoming a landowner, and eventually a partner in the Arizona Republic newspaper. He and his wife, Jessie Fremont Howe, moved into the mansion with their children, Thomas, James, and Jessie Jean. Their years in the house were marked by pride and turmoil. The children grew up in its rooms, exploring its nooks and staircases, while the city around them prepared for a world on the brink of global conflict. When World War I erupted, both Thomas and James joined the military. Only Thomas returned. James died on the battlefield, his loss casting a permanent shadow over the family's memories of the house. The tragedy of war reached directly into the Victorian mansion on Monroe Street, merging global history with the intimate story of a Phoenix family. Their daughter, Jessie Jean, carried the clearest recollections of life inside the Rosson House. Her later interviews in the 1970s revealed fragments of daily life, a woman remembering childhood dinners, family hardships, and the emotional weight of living within walls that witnessed constant change. Her memories preserved moments that would have otherwise vanished, In August of 1914, the Higleys sold the Rosson House to a family that would stay longer than anyone else, the Gammels. Their story was strikingly different from the refined political narratives of the Rossons, Goldbergs, and Higleys. William Gammel had once been a gambler in the rough mining town of Jerome, Arizona. He married Frances Christopher, a Hispanic woman from Tucson, in 1904, and together they had 3 daughters, Annie, Wilma, and Atlanta, Georgia. Their life was modest and practical, built on hard work rather than status. When the Gammels bought the mansion, the country was changing rapidly. Prohibition was approaching, and William's business, the Capitol Saloon on Washington Street, faced inevitable decline. By 1916, the city directory listed his business as the Capitol Buffet, now selling only soft drinks. As economic pressures grew, William sought new ways to support his family. In 1919, he was listed as an orange grower. By 1921, the directory showed that Frances Gammel was renting out furnished rooms inside the Rosson House. It was a transformation born of necessity. To survive financially, the Gammels turned the Victorian mansion into a boarding house. Walls were moved, porches were enclosed, rooms were subdivided, kitchens and bathrooms were added. The ornate architecture that once represented Phoenix's early promise was gradually broken apart, reshaped for tenants rather than elegance. The Rosson House was no longer a private family home. It became a space of transience, a place where strangers came and went, where lives briefly overlapped, where the original beauty of the structure had to compete with the practical realities of a changing world. The Gammels stayed through the Great Depression, through the cultural shifts of the 1920s, through the rise of automobiles in the desert city, and into the post-war era. They remained until 1948, the longest residence in the mansion's entire history, but by then, the house was no longer recognizable. Its Victorian identity had been buried under decades of alterations, its rooms worn down by constant use. After the Gammels moved on, the Rosson House entered its darkest years. Sold repeatedly, its condition deteriorated with every new owner. Rooming houses became boarding houses became flop houses. By mid-century, the once glorious structure stood as a crumbling shell of the past, surrounded by the growing industrialization of downtown Phoenix. The mansion that once symbolized wealth and modernity now stood as a relic of decay. Travelers who passed by in the 1950s and 60s saw boarded windows, sagging porches, peeling paint, and the fading remnants of a masterpiece. Inside, tangled wires, broken fixtures, and makeshift partitions covered the original craftsmanship. The turret no longer gleamed. It watched silently as the city rose around it, taller, louder, and indifferent. Yet even then, the Rosson House refused to disappear. Its bones were strong, its history was deeply rooted, and its presence remained undeniable, even in ruin. By the early 1970s, the mansion's survival became a pivotal question. Downtown Phoenix was undergoing redevelopment. Old buildings were being demolished to make way for modern structures. Many believed the Rosson House would be next, but fate intervened, not through chance, but through the determination of a mayor who refused to let history vanish. At the urging of Mayor John D. Driggs, the city of Phoenix purchased the Rosson House in 1974, along with the remaining land of Block 14. What followed was one of the largest community-driven restoration efforts the city had ever seen. Volunteers, institutions, historians, builders, and local residents came together to revive the mansion. They scraped away layers of paint, removed partitions, uncovered original details, and rebuilt the structure piece by piece. Over years of painstaking work, the Rosson House returned to life, its Victorian character restored, its architecture honored, and its story preserved. Today, it stands not as a museum of tragedy, but as a testament to resilience. A house that survived ambition, financial collapse, multiple families, war, prohibition, decay, and near destruction. A house that watched an entire city rise from the desert. A house that lived. By June 1897, after months of strain, the Rossons sold the house and half of Block 14 to Aaron and Carrie Goldberg for $10,000. A month later, the Rosson family left Phoenix, moving to Los Angeles in search of better educational opportunities for their children and perhaps a chance to escape the mounting pressures they faced. For Phoenix, the sale marked the end of the Rossons' chapter. For the family, it marked the beginning of their final tragedy. In Los Angeles, Dr. Rosson fell ill. After several weeks of suffering, he died on May 12, 1898. Speculation swirled about the cause, fueled by recent life insurance purchases, but an autopsy concluded he died of gastroenteritis. Flora lived in Los Angeles until her own death in 1911. Her life described simply on her certificate: household duties. Their story had ended far from the home they had once believed would secure their legacy. The Rosson House remained behind, carrying their memories in its walls. By the time the 1970s arrived, the Rosson House stood at a crossroads between erasure and rebirth. Once the pride of Phoenix's elite, the mansion had collapsed into a fractured version of its former glory. Its brick walls were weathered and broken. The once grand porches were walled in, suffocating the architectural beauty that had defined its identity. Graffiti covered the remaining woodwork. Windows were cracked or missing entirely. Inside, the grand staircase that once welcomed influential Phoenix families had been scarred by decades of constant use. The turrets, the carvings, the decorative wood trim, everything that once spoke of ambition and craftsmanship was fading under neglect. And yet, there was something about the house, some quality that refused to die. Even in decay, it stood with an air of defiance, a reminder of a Phoenix that no longer existed. To some, it was simply an abandoned building. To others, it was the last surviving Victorian mansion in the entire downtown district. A fragile time capsule trapped between two worlds, the Phoenix of the past and the Phoenix that was rising with skyscrapers and modern development. City leaders faced a choice. They could demolish the house and clear the land, following the trend of rapid redevelopment, or they could attempt something extraordinary to save one of the last surviving pieces of 19th century Phoenix. Mayor John D. Driggs chose the latter. In 1974, under his urging, the city of Phoenix purchased the Rosson House, along with the remaining land of Block 14. It was a decision rooted not in nostalgia, but in recognition of historical value. The house represented the origins of Phoenix's political, architectural, and cultural identity. Losing it meant losing a part of the city's soul, but purchasing the mansion was only the beginning. The real challenge lay in bringing it back to life. Years of modifications during its boarding house era had carved the mansion into a maze of small rooms and makeshift apartments. Multiple kitchens and bathrooms had been installed in places that were never intended to hold them. Plumbing had been improvised, electrical wiring was tangled and unsafe. Walls had been erected where original hallways once existed. It took historical photographs, newspaper descriptions, architectural analysis, and community memory to understand what the home had originally looked like. The restoration became a citywide undertaking. Volunteers, craftsmen, historians, and local institutions joined together in one of Phoenix's largest community preservation projects. They removed layers of linoleum that hid original wood floors. They stripped away partitions that divided rooms into cramped spaces. They uncovered ornamental details buried under decades of paint. Every beam, every hinge, every carved panel was examined, repaired, or recreated with meticulous care. This was not a simple renovation. It was surgical, slow, precise, and respectful. The goal was authenticity, to return the mansion to its 1895 appearance, down to the smallest architectural detail. The exterior brick was restored to its original fired red color. The Queen Anne ornamentation was rebuilt. The turret regained its distinctive Victorian profile. Decorative wooden trim was repaired by artisans who studied 19th century woodworking techniques. Inside, the grand staircase was reconstructed according to its original design. Interior walls were returned to their correct placement. Period-appropriate colors, patterns, furnishings, and details were selected based on historical sources. The restoration team worked not only to revive the physical structure, but to revive the story of the Rosson House itself. They studied historical documents, such as Sanborn fire insurance maps and records from the Arizona Republic, to understand how Phoenix families lived in the late 1800s. They preserved letters and interviews from descendants of former residents. They listened to oral histories that described what life in the house had once felt like. Every detail mattered. As the work progressed, the mansion began to look less like a ruin and more like a living portrait of 19th century Phoenix. It became a symbol of what community dedication could achieve. Local schools participated. Civic groups donated time and resources. Historians offered guidance. For many residents, the Rosson House became a shared project, a mission to preserve the city's identity. The restoration took years. There were moments of frustration, moments of excitement, and moments when the past seemed to reveal itself through forgotten details discovered under dust and broken plaster. Slowly, the mansion's original character emerged from the shadows. When the restoration was complete, the Rosson House stood once again in its Victorian splendor. Its interior glowed with the warm tones of polished wood and period lighting. Its windows reflected sunlight, just as they had in 1895. The turret, the Moongate influence, the hooded windows, every feature was revived with astonishing accuracy. For the first time in decades, the house looked alive. The transformation was so profound that the mansion was not simply restored, it was reborn. With its rebirth came a new purpose. The Rosson House was open to the public as a historic house museum, operated by the Heritage Square Foundation and Guild within the Phoenix Heritage and Science Park. Visitors could now walk through the restored rooms, experiencing firsthand the contrast between Phoenix's rough frontier origins and its early pursuit of modernity. They could step into the world of Dr. Rosson, the Goldbergs, the Higleys, and the Gamels. They could see where a newspaper magnate once fought to breathe. They could feel how the city had changed, grown, suffered, and survived. Through its survival, the Rosson House became more than architecture. It became a storytelling space, one that held the layers of Phoenix's past like chapters in a living book. It preserved not just the story of a family, but the story of a city's evolution, its ambitions, its hardships, and its relentless push toward the future. The mansion no longer stood as a symbol of decline or abandonment. Instead, it became one of Phoenix's most cherished historic landmarks, listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It became a rare reminder of what downtown Phoenix once looked like before automobiles replaced streetcars, before concrete replaced adobe, and before skyscrapers replaced the open desert skyline. Visitors walking through its rooms today often feel the strange weight of time, how quickly life can change, how buildings absorb stories, how history survives only when people choose to keep it alive. The Rosson House survived because Phoenix chose to remember. It survived because a community believed the past mattered, and it survived because every person who walked inside felt something stirring in the air, something built from memory, tragedy, resilience, and hope. The house stands, more than 125 years after its construction, as a testament to endurance. A mansion that saw ambition turn to hardship, that watched families come and go, that withstood decades of decay, and that finally rose again through the collective effort of a city that refused to let its history disappear. And yet, the mansion's story is far from over. By June 1897, after months of strain, the Rossons sold the house and half of Block 14 to Aaron and Carrie Goldberg for $10,000. A month later, the Rosson family left Phoenix, moving to Los Angeles in search of better educational opportunities for their children and perhaps a chance to escape the mounting pressures they faced. For Phoenix, the sale marked the end of the Rossons' chapter. For the family, it marked the beginning of their final tragedy. In Los Angeles, Dr. Rosson fell ill. After several weeks of suffering, he died on May 12, 1898. Speculation swirled about the cause, fueled by recent life insurance purchases, but an autopsy concluded he died of gastroenteritis. Flora lived in Los Angeles until her own death in 1911, her life described simply on her certificate, household duties. Their story had ended far from the home they had once believed would secure their legacy. The Rosson House remained behind, carrying their memories in its walls. Today, the Rosson House stands at the edge of Heritage Square, its Victorian silhouette rising like a time traveler in the middle of a modern city. Skyscrapers surround it, casting long shadows across its brick walls, yet the mansion refuses to be swallowed by the present. Its restored turret still catches the desert sun. Its narrow windows still hold the quiet stories of those who lived within its walls. And its rooms, carefully rebuilt to their 1895 condition, breathe the layered history of Phoenix itself. Visitors who step inside the Rosson House today often feel an immediate shift in the air. The moment the door closes behind them, the noise of downtown fades, replaced by the hush of polished floors, restored woodwork, and Victorian-era details that whisper of another time. The restored parlor feels poised for a guest who might arrive any moment. The dining room seems ready to host a family meal that was interrupted a century ago. The bedrooms echo with the faint impression of past lives, children growing, families arguing, illnesses fought, decisions made. It is a house that lived fully, and that memory remains in every corner. The mansion's architecture is one of its most striking qualities. Designed by A.P. Petit, it incorporates elements far more cosmopolitan than typical Western homes of the period. The Chinese moon-gate influence adds a quiet sense of geometry and symbolism. The Italianate hooded windows soften the exterior facade. The French-style octagonal turret becomes a visual anchor, giving the house a sense of movement and height. For Phoenix, in the 1890s, this was sophisticated design, ambitious, bold, and unexpected. The exterior brickwork is another rarity. At a time when adobe dominated construction in Arizona, the Rosson House was built from fired brick and wood. Brick-making factories had begun operating in the region, but few residences used the material. The Rosson House became one of the earliest examples of this new architectural direction. Nearby, houses such as the John T. Dennis Mansion and the M. Jacobs home echoed similar transitions, though many of those structures have since vanished. The Rosson House remains one of the last survivors of an era when Phoenix was reshaping its identity with each new building. Inside the house, the restoration reveals not only architectural detail, but also the evolution of Phoenix's technological advancements. The presence of electric lighting in an 1895 home reflected the city's modern spirit. The Rosson House had both hot and cold running water at a time when many American homes relied on wells or hand pumps. The indoor upstairs bathroom was a luxury that many families in the United States would not experience for decades. The telephone, rare and expensive, symbolized the family's high status and the city's rapid development. And the streetcar line that passed just outside their front steps connected them directly to the rest of Phoenix's growing neighborhoods. It is difficult to imagine the Rosson House not as a museum, but as a living home, bustling with the movements and emotions of the families who once lived there. The Rossons, the Goldbergs, the Heileys, and the Gammels each left distinct imprints on the mansion, shaping its legacy through their struggles, triumphs, and losses. The Rosson family represents the optimism and ambition of early Phoenix. They built the house as a testament to success, only to leave it behind under financial strain and personal hardship. Their story is both inspiring and tragic, a powerful reminder of how quickly fortunes can turn in the American West. The Goldbergs brought civic influence and social stability to the house. Their contributions to Phoenix politics and commerce echo through local history. Under their ownership, the mansion stood as a place of respect and community leadership. The Hiley family's years in the house were marked by both everyday life and the deep sorrow of losing a son in World War I. The memories preserved by their daughter, Jessie Jean, add a human dimension to the mansion. Small moments of childhood, heartbreak, and resilience that survive only because she shared them decades later. The Gammels, who lived in the house longer than anyone else, transformed it through necessity. Their changes reflected the economic struggles of early 20th century Arizona, prohibition, shifting industries, and the need to adapt quickly in a changing world. By turning the mansion into a boarding house, they kept it alive even as it was slowly altered beyond recognition. All of these families contributed to the Rosson House's identity. Their stories blend into the structure, becoming inseparable from the walls, the floors, the windows, and the air inside each room. The house is a rare example of a building that reflects not just the life of one family, but the evolution of an entire city. The decision to restore the mansion in the 1970s ensured that their stories would not be lost. Without that effort, the Rosson House would have been demolished. The city would have lost one of its few tangible connections to the 1800s, and the memories tied to the mansion would have disappeared into the dust of redevelopment. Instead, the Rosson House now stands as a public testament to Phoenix's origins. It is more than a museum, it is a narrative space. Its restoration allows visitors to understand the scale of transformation that Phoenix experienced, from frontier settlement to territorial capital, from agricultural community to major American metropolis. Walking through the rooms, one can sense the layers of history. The parlor reminds visitors of the political meetings and social gatherings held by the Rossons. The nursery reflects the joys and sorrows of raising 7 children in a time when infant mortality was heartbreakingly common. The master bedroom evokes the quiet dignity of the Goldbergs, whose civic leadership shaped the city's direction. The hallways recall the footsteps of the Healy children, running between rooms before the outbreak of a global war took one of them away forever. The subdivided spaces hint at the Gamels' adaptation, their need to transform history into practicality for survival. Today, Heritage Square and the Phoenix Heritage and Science Park preserve that legacy. Visitors from around the world explore the house, learning not only about Victorian architecture, but about the social, political, and economic forces that shaped Phoenix. The Rosson House stands as one of the city's most iconic landmarks, photographed, studied, admired, and remembered. Its survival is a reminder that history is fragile. Buildings disappear, families move on, stories fade, but sometimes, through effort, preservation, and collective determination, the past can be revived. The Rosson House remains a symbol of endurance, of a city's beginnings, of American ambition, of the struggles and triumphs of ordinary people, and of the power of community to protect what once seemed destined to be lost. This mansion, built in 1895, stands today as Phoenix's most mysterious Victorian survivor, a house that witnessed joy, heartbreak, illness, prosperity, loss, and rebirth. A house that outlived every family who ever called it home. A house that continues to speak, in quiet ways, to anyone willing to listen.